Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into the magical madness of the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion Remastered, and trust me, you don't want to sleep on spells in this game. Sure, swinging a sword or sneaking through the shadows feels awesome, but if you're ignoring magic entirely, you're seriously gimping your character. Even if you're rolling a pure warrior or a stealthy assassin, having a few clutch spells up your sleeve can turn a tough fight or tricky dungeon into a breeze. We're talking utility, survival, and straight-up game-breaking advantages that can make your build unstoppable. Now, if you're rolling as a mage, or even just dabbling in the arcane arts, you're in for a real treat. Once you start mastering each school of magic, that's when Oblivion really opens up. We're talking about endgame spell combos that let you bend the world to your will. Want to walk on water while invisible and nuking enemies from a mile away? Yep, that's totally a thing. So stick around, because in this video, we're diving into the wildest, most powerful spells you can unlock in the endgame. And trust me, you'll want to add these to your spellbook ASAP. Let's get into it. I'm quickly moving on to the video. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching. Alright, let us talk about one of the absolute best endgame spells in Oblivion Remastered. The spell that brings the thunder, literally. I am talking about Summon Storm Atronach. It might not be the flashiest spell on paper, but in practice, this thing is an absolute beast. For a conjuration spell that costs less magicka than something like Summon Lich, it delivers a ridiculous amount of value, both in combat duration and pure power output. Now you might be wondering, why not go with Summon Lich instead? It costs more than 200 magicka, so it must be stronger, right? Not exactly. The Lich only sticks around for about 20 seconds, while the Storm Atronach lingers for a solid 40 seconds. That is double the time to smash, zap, and crush enemies. And honestly, by the time your Storm Atronach finishes its job, the Lich would already be fading into the void, waving goodbye without actually doing much damage. Here is where things get even better. Storm Atronachs deal shock damage. And guess what most Daedra absolutely hate? That is right, shock magic. So if you are heading into one of those late-game Oblivion rifts, filled to the brim with Daedric nightmares, having a Storm Atronach by your side is like showing up with your own personal lightning storm. Plus, if you stack shock enchantments on your weapons, you are basically turning into a Daedra-slaying machine. And let us not forget the vibe factor. Summoning one of these towering elemental giants just feels cool. The animation, the booming impact, the sheer chaos they bring to a fight, it is like calling down the wrath of the heavens. So if you are building that perfect endgame spell loadout in Oblivion Remastered, do not sleep on this one. Summon Storm Atronach might not be the most expensive spell in your book, but it is easily one of the most powerful, cost-effective, and straight-up fun spells you can cast. One of the most underrated, yet completely overpowered endgame spells in Oblivion Remastered has got to be Legendary Life Detection. If you are playing a stealth build and you are not using this spell, you are honestly missing out on one of the best tools in the game. It comes from the mysticism school of magic and lasts a solid 2 minutes, which, in dungeon terms, is a long time. You can grab it pretty easily too, either from Gaspar Stegin at the Arcane University or from Oralinwe in the Imperial City. The price is low, the benefit is massive. Now here's the cool part. Even though thieves typically do not specialize in magic, you can still get a lot of use out of a simple spell like this. All you need is a minor version of life detection, and you are set. Players often cast this spell while jumping around the world, not just to see enemies, but also to level up mysticism and acrobatics at the same time. Yes, seriously, just jump, cast, repeat. Before you know it, you will be hitting master level in both skills without even realizing you are grinding. It is a lazy player's dream come true. In actual combat, this spell is your early warning system. You pop it before entering a room or hallway, and suddenly you have a perfect outline of every enemy lurking around corners or behind walls. No more awkward ambushes or getting caught while lockpicking a chest. It gives you the power to plan every encounter like a tactical genius. You are not just walking into a room, you are stalking your prey with precision. It completely changes how you approach dungeon crawling. Pair that intel with a well-placed sneak attack, a high-damage bow, a nasty poison, and boom, one-shot eliminations left and right. And because you always know where your enemies are, you stay one step ahead every time. Legendary Life Detection turns your stealth build into something more than just sneaky. It makes you surgical. This is not just a spell. This is a lifestyle upgrade for endgame thieves, assassins, or anyone who wants to control the battlefield before the first arrow even flies. Immolating Blast is hands down one of the flashiest ways to clear out a cave full of the undead in Oblivion Remastered. This destruction spell is all about fire. And let me tell you, zombies absolutely hate fire. It deals a solid chunk of damage instantly, and when you are walking into a crypt crawling with groaning corpses, this is the spell you want lighting up the walls. Fire has always been strong against the undead in the Elder Scrolls, and Immolating Blast sticks to that tradition. Just one good cast, and you can turn a zombie ambush into a pile of smoldering ash. Now, Immolating Blast is not alone in its elemental category. It has a cold-hearted cousin called Ice Blast, and a more electrifying counterpart called Electrocution. All three spells deal the same amount of damage, but here is the twist. Ice Blast is the cheapest one to cast. That means if you are trying to grind your destruction skill or manage your magicka more carefully, Ice Blast is your best friend. You can toss out more of them before needing a potion or a rest, which makes it the go-to for long dungeon crawls. But let us not count fire out just yet. Even though Ice Blast is more efficient, Immolating Blast has the edge when it comes to effectiveness, especially in specific matchups. Undead enemies like zombies, skeletons, and wraiths take increased damage from fire. That makes Immolating Blast a tactical choice, not just a flashy one. So if you know you are heading into a crypt or haunted ruin, fire is the way to go. You will end fights faster, take less damage, and honestly, it just feels good to watch everything go up in flames. As for shock damage, that is where Electrocution comes into play. It is especially useful against Daedra, who are more vulnerable to lightning-based spells. However, if you are planning to take on Daedric Ruins or Oblivion Gates, there is actually a specific shock spell you should look for instead. It outperforms Electrocution in those scenarios, but we will save that one for another video. The main takeaway? Every element has its place, but when it comes to dealing with zombies, Immolating Blast is the spell that turns a scary cave crawl into a fireworks show. Finger of the Mountain is, hands down, one of the most ridiculous damage spells you can get your hands on in Oblivion Remastered. If you are playing a mage build and looking to absolutely melt your enemies, this is the spell you want in your arsenal. It is not just flashy, although it definitely has that thunderous flair. It is also the highest damage destruction spell in the entire game when fully powered. Nothing else even comes close when you are talking about raw, obliterating force. Now, getting this spell is a bit of a journey. You will need to complete the Finger of the Mountain questline. And here is the trick. When it comes time to hand over the book, give it to Arana, not Tychius. That is the key decision that unlocks the real power. It feels a little shady, sure, but if you are after ultimate magical destruction, you are going to have to make some questionable choices along the way. Think of it as sacrificing a little morality for a whole lot of voltage. Once you get your hands on the spell, the results are immediate. It does not have a duration effect. This thing hits instantly, and it hits hard. We are talking about a pure burst of shock magic that fries pretty much anything that stands in your way. Even the Daedra, who you will be seeing a lot of as you progress through the main story, are especially weak to shock. That makes Finger of the Mountain not only powerful, but also strategically perfect for endgame content. Compared to something like Immolation Blast, which is solid in its own right, Finger of the Mountain completely blows it out of the water. Sure, it costs more magicka to cast, but the damage more than makes up for it. This is the kind of spell that makes you feel like a true archmage. Lightning cracking down from the sky, enemies getting vaporized in one shot, and you standing there like an unstoppable magical powerhouse. If you are running a mage and want to flex in the most spectacular way, this is the spell to aim for. Paralyze is one of those spells that might not look like much at first glance, but once you actually start using it, oh boy, it changes the game. Sure, it only lasts 10 seconds, and yes, there are flashier, more dramatic spells out there. But the beauty of Paralyze is in its simplicity. You stop the enemy from fighting back. That is it. No blocking, no counterattacks, no running away. Just a helpless NPC flopping to the ground like a ragdoll while you line up your next attack. Now here is where it gets fun. When you hit someone with Paralyze, they do not just freeze in place, they actually fall over. That little tumble adds a few extra seconds of vulnerability while they scramble to get back on their feet. And that is your cue. Right as they are getting up, you cast it again. Boom! They fall again. You can basically stun lock them, keeping them in a never-ending loop of face planting into the dirt while you beat them down at your leisure. No one's swinging a sword or casting a fireball when they are too busy hitting the ground every 10 seconds. There is a bit of strategy to this too. If you combine Paralyze with spells or effects that weaken an enemy's resistance to magic, you can stretch that 10-second window a little longer. Suddenly, it becomes more than just a control spell. It becomes a core part of your damage rotation. On the flip side, enemies with high magic resistance will shake it off faster. So it is not a one-size-fits-all solution. But with the right setup, it becomes devastating, especially in tight dungeons or boss fights where mobility and timing are everything. And let us not forget the price tag. You can buy this spell from Orlinwy, and it is way cheaper than something like Fingers of the Mountain. That spell might light up the room and look impressive, but if your goal is to absolutely dominate a fight without taking a scratch, Paralyze is the smarter investment. It is low cost, high reward, and once you get the timing down, it just feels unfair, in the best way possible. Alright, so let us talk about one of the absolute best spells you can get your hands on in the late game of Oblivion Remastered, Legendary Spell Reflection. If you are tired of getting zapped, scorched, or frozen by those smug spellcasters, this spell is your ultimate revenge card. We are talking full-on immunity to magic and the ability to reflect that damage right back at the enemy. That is not just defense, it is a counterattack built right into your magical shield. Now, you might be thinking, okay, cool, another defensive spell. But no, this is on a whole different level. When you activate Legendary Spell Reflection, every bit of magical damage coming your way just bounces off. You do not take a single point of damage. Instead, your enemies get a taste of their own spell, literally. It is especially satisfying when some powerful necromancer hurls a fireball at you, only for it to slam right back into their smug face. You get to walk away untouched, and they drop like a sack of potatoes. One of the best things about this spell is how it stacks up against other defensive magic like Spell Absorption. Sure, Spell Absorption lets you convert incoming damage into magicka, which is great for staying in the fight longer. But Reflection is much more aggressive. You are not just surviving, you are turning the tables instantly. It speeds up combat against mages and makes those fights feel way less like a stressful dodge and heal dance. And here is the real kicker. You can enchant your gear with this bad boy. That means you do not even have to cast the spell manually every time. You can be swinging your sword, firing your bow, or casting other spells, all while your enchanted armor keeps bouncing magic back at your enemies like a mirror made of pure vengeance. If you are building for endgame content, especially against heavy spellcasters, this is not just a strong choice, it is essential. Alright, let's talk about one of the most ridiculously overpowered spells in Oblivion Remastered, Legendary Soul Trap. Now, you might be thinking, Soul Trap? That sounds pretty basic. But trust me, this version is anything but basic. We are not talking about your average run-of-the-mill spell here. This thing is a game changer, a reality bender, and honestly, once you get your hands on it, you pretty much ascend into godhood. No exaggeration. You go from struggling with bandits to reflecting Daedric Prince's wrath without even lifting a finger. So what does it do? First off, the basics. It is a mysticism spell that lasts for 1 minute. You can grab it from Borisayan at the Praxographical Center, and it works just like a regular soul trap, except not really. Sure, it lets you trap souls into soul gems, which is already amazing because you will find those things lying around everywhere, in all shapes and sizes. But the real magic happens when you start using those trapped souls to fuel your enchanted gear. With this spell, every enemy you fight becomes fuel for your ultimate arsenal. Infinite charges all the time. That is not just strong. That is broken. And here is where it goes completely off the rails. With Legendary Soul Trap, you can start crafting gear that turns you into an invincible ghost ninja. Want to be completely undetectable? Done. Want to reflect all incoming damage? Yes, 100% of it. Right back at your enemies? That is a casual Tuesday with this spell. It lets you stack enchantments to such ridiculous degrees that you stop playing the game and start watching it play itself. You will walk into a fight and just stand there. Your enemies will destroy themselves trying to hurt you. Honestly, it is one of those endgame spells that makes you laugh at how busted it is. The developers probably thought, you know what, let them have fun. and just let this spell be as insane as possible. And I am not complaining. When you are running around Cyrodiil with a full set of gear powered by legendary Soul Trap, you are not just a hero anymore. You are a divine force of vengeance, collecting souls like Pokemon and bouncing damage like a magical trampoline. It is peak Oblivion chaos, and I love every second of it. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.